Comic Draw is a brand new iPad app that is focused on making comics. At this point, I've used so many drawing apps that I have a mental checklist in my head of what makes a good drawing app. They all kind of have the same things, it's what they do. They tend to focus on one narrow niche that makes them unique. Linea is super focused on sketching. Concepts is like this whole vector paint hybrid thing. Pencil by 53 is for conceptual sketches. But other than that special focus that any given app might have, they're all pretty much 90% the same, which means that if you open up one iPad app and start drawing at it, it's gonna feel like all of the others. Comic Draw is different. At first, this can be a little bit off-putting, but to understand and appreciate Comic Draw, you have to learn how the app was meant to be used first. Comic Draw is designed to take you through the entire comic creation process, all the way from the start of writing your script to the end, which is like printing and publishing your comic. For example, if I was going to make a comic today, what I might do is start in Medibang, and I might lay out all the panels there, and then I might move those images over to PROCREATE and do my drawing and painting there, because that's what I like to use. And then I might move it to the desktop, where I might do like the lettering, that sort of thing, and then prep it and get it ready for either print or the web. Whereas with Comic Draw, you bundle this all together. You can make multiple pages in one file, create an entire book, figure out what size of panels you want to use. Comic Draw starts with the script. I would actually recommend that you start your script in Comic Draw. Don't import it from something else. If you type in the word panels, a little panel icon denotes where you're at. It does the same thing for like speech bubbles, captions, and sound effects as well. And all of these little things come in really handy later. Once the script is done, it asks you what size of comic you want to make. There are a lot of options here, and your most standard comic layouts are available. Each one has like margins built into it and its own little panel grid, and so a lot of stuff is built in ready for you to use. The next step is how you actually lay out your panels and your text and arrange your comic strip. And this is why I recommended writing your script in Comic Draw, because it makes it so easy to transition between these two areas. You can pull up your script on one side and you can just drag the panel over and resize it on your canvas. You can also drag in your speech bubbles, you can drag in your sound effects the same exact way. It also helps that there's grid there, so as you drag your panels around, it's going to snap to that grid and makes it really easy to lay things out. It's easy to resize your panels, make the borders thicker, or change the default spacing between panels. We comic pros call that area the gutter because that's where our minds are at. The app is also built around the idea of it being a book, so you're not just creating one page of your comic, you're creating a script with possibly multiple pages, and then you can create multiple pages of art as you go as well. All of this is saved into one convenient file, which makes it really easy to export, either as a PDF, an EPUB file, or even as separate images. One thing that I didn't test that I'm a little bit curious about, and I didn't have time to write out like a 20 or 30 page comic, was how these files respond. Does your iPad slow down if you have a really long comic? That sort of thing. Didn't have the chance to test it out. I'm kind of curious if there is anybody who's used it for a really long form comic. If you've noticed any of that kind of lag, let me know. So this whole process of writing your script and then composing your comic and laying things out is one of the more time consuming things that I find when I'm drawing a comic, especially a longer form comic. And it's one of the things that this app does really well. In fact, this might be one of the few times, maybe the first time, where I've used an iPad app and thought, this is easier than doing it the way I've always done it on the desktop. There might be apps like this on the desktop that have already done that, this idea of kind of doing scripts and layouts. I've never used them. Doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means I'm clueless. I'll say this too. This is the first time I've ever thought, man, I wish I had a keyboard on my iPad to do this. I've never really wanted or needed a keyboard in the past. So there are these three icons along the top of the program that you probably noticed already. We've been in the third one, which is where we like to lay out our panels and our text bubbles and things like that. There are two others. One is for this, your kind of general rough sketches for your pencils and that sort of thing. And then the middle one is kind of for your finished artwork. Once I get my layout in place, I'd like to jump over to the pencil layer and do my roughs and sketches. And there are tools along the left-hand side. They are built for that section. So the section that has your text and panels has all your text options. This section has all your pencil options. The paint section has more options, a more robust color palette and that sort of thing. So depending on what like mindset that you're in when you're using the app, it gives you the tools you need to do that, which I thought was kind of an interesting way, because there are a lot of tools in here, there are a lot of features in here, is an interesting way to kind of hide those features away from you when you're not using them. One thing I will say that is that the first thing I did, and it's probably the first thing that most people do when they get a new drawing app, is they dive in and they just start sketching and fiddling around. And if you don't really follow kind of the process that's been laid out for you, this app can be kind of confusing, and you could be sitting there going, where is my paint bucket tool? Where are my better brushes? You know, it's very easy to get lost in this app if you don't really understand the mindset you need to be in when using it. So I would recommend, you know, diving in and starting to understand the app a little bit better. There's like a 200-page manual that you can get for this thing, worth checking out and seeing everything that the app can do. Also, there's a video by Eric Merced. I'll link it up in the description down below and also at the end of this video. He gives a primer on how he uses it. I think it's a really good way. It helped me a lot understand this app and understand what it's good for. And of course, there's drawing. You know, in the pencil mode, you have your pencils and you have a lot of different options for those pencils. The brushes aren't really super robust compared to, you know, other apps. PROCREATE is the one that comes to mind, but I think it's on par with something like Medibang. But everything you're going to need is here in the sketching section. The ability to change the opacity of your strokes, grab a couple different kinds of pencils, that sort of thing. Once you switch over to your, you know, pen and paint section, you're going to have even more options available to you. There are a decent number of brushes and effects, and even like this cool halftone dot pattern or those little hatches you see in comics. So if you're printing in black and white, that's right there, easy to access. There were a lot of times in this app where I thought, man, but if only I could do this. And then the more I dug, the more I found that I could actually do with it. That's really impressive. This is the first iteration of this app. It just came out, and to see how many features they like packed into this thing is really impressive. They even got little things like the layers have blending modes. But since this is a first iteration, I did see a lot of little things, really nitpicks, honestly, that could be adjusted, changed, tweaked, added to improve it. For example, it would be great to have more fonts to choose from. Right now, we only have the one font, which is actually the basic type font I like a lot. They also have added in sound effects. There's this kind of yelling, big, bold font that you can change the color and adjust the strokes and drop shadows on. But that font, to me, feels a little bit old-fashioned. I can't really find a specific use for it. Another thing I noticed was 2 fingers to undo something. Sometimes it worked really well, sometimes it didn't. It seemed like you had to be really forceful and deliberate with that action. Also, there were parts of the interface that were a little bit laggy. For example, if I'd tap a color on the color picker, it seemed to be just a fraction of the second slower than what I expected, and this led to an overall feel of the program not being as snappy and as quick as you'd expect it to be. Same thing with the color picker. I found that when I chose another color and then I'd start painting with it, what I realized is that I had to actually close the menu instead of the menu auto closing as soon as I start to draw. You know, but again, it's just a bunch of little things like that make it not feel quite as polished as some of the other apps that have been around for a while. But at the same time, it also feels like, hey, this is version 1.0, so a lot of that is totally acceptable in your first iteration. So to wrap up and conclude, I'd say once you get into the flow and understand how the app should be used, it's very good, it's very impressive, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. If you draw comics online, offline, anywhere, and you have an iPad and you're drawing on that iPad, you really should check this out and see what it has to offer. There's a 14-day free trial when you download the app. After that, it's $20, which is expensive for an app, but when you think about everything it does and how useful of a tool, especially a layout tool it is, might be worth it for a lot of comic professionals. Hey, thanks for making it to the end. I'd like to thank all of my Patreon supporters for supporting this channel, and anybody who clicks on my Amazon links or visits my websites when they're doing research into drawing tablets and software and things like that. Again, if you have any comments or questions, you can always hit me up on Twitter, or you can leave a comment down below. That's all I've got for now. I'll see you guys later.